Hello and good afternoon. I hope you've been having a fabulous reInvent already. Please go ahead and put on your headset if you want to be able to hear us. My name is Rich Hua, and I'm the worldwide head of our Epic Leadership Program at Amazon Web Services. And I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Alessimino. And today we'll be talking about emotionally intelligent leadership for an AI-powered future. Ala, you want to say a few words?
Hi everyone, good afternoon. Can you hear us? Can you give us a thumbs up if you can hear?
Awesome.
All right, awesome. Well, we're excited to be here with you today. All right.
Excellent. All right, so you're probably wondering what the Epic Leadership Program is. It is actually an effort to upskill leaders in emotional and social intelligence skills so they can lead with greater empathy, purpose, inspiration, and connection. And you may be wondering, what the heck does this have to do with AI or technology or innovation? Well, it turns out a heck of a lot. Because transformation, adopting new technologies, innovation, change requires IQ and cognitive skills, but also requires a whole bunch of emotional social skills if you're going to actually be able to succeed. And since our inception of the EPIC program over 5 years ago, we've had the privilege of being able to engage over 350,000 leaders within Amazon, all the way up to the most senior leaders. And then we decided to externalize it, and we've been sharing this with customers all over the world to the tune of about 60,000 leaders across 8,000 different organizations. And so I'm very excited that we can offer this both to senior leaders, to managers of all levels, and then all sorts of technologists. And we have an AI-powered program that's going to be released next year that will help anybody be able to learn emotional intelligence skills to help them be happier, healthier, and more successful. Now, before I jump in, I always like to understand my audience a little better, and so I'm just going to have a little bit of a show of hands, get you a little bit just sort of engaged, and then allow me to understand you a little better. Raise your hand for which one is more likely for you. Okay, are you more likely to get a speeding ticket or a parking ticket? All right, how many of us would get a speeding ticket? All right, how many of us get a parking ticket? All right, okay, well, then we've got a bunch of speeders out here. Okay, that seems fairly, that makes sense. How many of us are early birds versus night owls, right? You get up really early in the morning and stay up really late at night. How many of you are early birds? Oh, wow, okay, a lot of early birds. How many of you are night owls? Oh, okay, similar but a little less. Okay, so we've got more speeders and more early birds so far. Finally, your CEO emails you and says, you've done a great job this year. I'm giving you an all-expense-paid 2-week vacation anywhere you like. I'm not saying it's going to happen, okay? I'm saying hypothetically speaking. Would you rather have beach and chill or adventure and thrill? Okay, how many of us just want beach and chill, do nothing? Okay, how about adventure and thrill? All right, I think beach and chill won that one. So, okay, this is mostly a speeding, early bird, beach and chill sort of a group. So anyway, great to see all of you, and you've already passed the first sort of assessment, which is engagement, both cognitively and also emotionally. So why do we have this program? We ask leaders, what are the skills you need to lead digital transformation now? The 5 skills they mentioned were adaptability, second was curiosity, then creativity, then comfort with ambiguity, and finally digital literacy. And this comes from Linda Hill, who's a professor at Harvard and a digital innovation expert. And what do you notice about these 5 skills? Right, number 5 is fully technical, but the first 4 have a lot to do with the human, emotional, social side. I mean, let's face it, if you're digitally literate today, doesn't mean what you know will help you tomorrow. And so things like adaptability, flexibility, constant change are what's required to be able to succeed in this AI-powered future. And when it comes to innovation, I think you all inherently know there are probably 3 legs to any sort of innovation change, right? You need people, process, and technology. Any guesses on which leg is the one that most factors into success or failure, right? I mean, clearly it's people, right? I've yet to find an innovation or transformation initiative where technology was the fundamental problem or the process was the fundamental problem. It always comes down to people in the end, and if we can actually solve that, we can be more successful both personally and also with our organizations. So before I jump into the rest of it, a little bit about me. I was born in Taiwan. I came to America when I was 3.5 years old, and I had 3 things going against me. I didn't speak English, I was very socially awkward, and had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And so for the first few weeks of school, my teacher actually stuck me off on the corner and thought I was cognitively impaired because I didn't answer to my American name. Well, I had a kind of a tough childhood. I had a hard time making friends, faced bullying, racism. And so what I did was I shut off all my emotions and decided, let me just focus on the cognitive side. Well, I figured out I was actually pretty smart. So my goal in life became to be a genius robot. And it actually worked out pretty well for a while. Straight A's in high school, got a perfect score on the SAT, got into UC Berkeley, studied electrical engineering, computer science, and my genius robot plan was going great until I did one thing that totally screwed it up. I got married. And my wife didn't really care about the genius part, really did not like the robot part. She wanted this thing like empathy, understanding, human connection. I'm like, what is this crap? No, all jokes aside, I realized I need to work on this from a personal perspective. And then I actually had a stint as a missionary and an evangelist for about 23 years. And so from both a personal and professional perspective, realized I needed to work on these skills. Well, I got to work, got a lot of mentoring, read tons of books, worked really hard at it, and took courses and dramatically improved to the point that C-level executives all the way to new managers started coming up and saying, can you coach me in these skills? I believe that they're the thing that will unlock my future success. And so here we are 400,000 people later where we find that anybody anywhere in the world at any level can benefit from social emotional skills. I have 2 grown children, and I'm proud to say they're both tax-paying citizens of the United States and earning their own income. And I have the greatest compliment any father could ever have from their children. They actually laugh at my jokes. And the final thing is, in addition to EQ, I also study Hapkido. It's a Korean martial art. I'm about to do my black belt test. And I love to say that I always try to use EQ in my interpersonal relationships, but if it doesn't work, I can always punch you in the face. So I've never actually had to do that, though, especially at reInvent, so I think we're all safe. So don't be afraid to come up afterwards. All jokes aside, let's jump in. We're going to talk about the state of the world in AI, EPIC, the evolution of leadership, optimizing yourself for innovation, and then optimizing your organization for innovation. I'll cover the first 2, and then Ala's going to cover the last 2. So, what is the state of the world right now? We are living in what I would call, really simply, a weird world. We've got things going on such as climate change, geopolitical instability, the suspension of truth in various parts of the world, and the rise of authoritarianism. So what do we do with all that? And against that backdrop, we have these 2 wild things happening, or one, which is the AI jerk. Okay, and what is a jerk? Actually, in physics, it's when the rate of acceleration or change sort of increases beyond your reference point. And AI is literally accelerating so fast, it, for many people, is going beyond human scale. It's hard to even comprehend, and it's faster than any other period of human history. These times are fraught with peril, but also with an incredible amount of promise. And so as I go around the world, I found that leaders are all thinking a similar set of things. And what are they thinking? It's here on this slide. Amy Webb, a renowned technology futurist, actually shared this in her South by Southwest talk. What word do you think this is? Please don't say it out loud. But I don't know what you were thinking, but what I was thinking was actually, oh, FUD. Okay, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. This is going on all over the world, from the C-level all the way down to the people using AI. There's a lot of uncertainty about what is happening. And I had the privilege of being able to talk to Brené Brown, who's one of the most renowned psychologists in America. And she said, I've never seen so many scared CEOs as I see today that she gets to work with, because there's just so much happening. And how many of us have encountered some FUD around AI? Okay, a majority of hands, right? So what else is happening? Well, another thing that's happening is also, FOMO, right? We all know what that means, the fear of missing out. Hey, AI FOMO is real, people. I mean, I sat down with so many leaders who I say, hey, what do you want to talk about? They said, we just want to use AI. We have no idea what to use it for, but we know we need to use it. Like, maybe a better hypothesis would be good for that. But how many of us have encountered some FOMO around AI, right? I mean, it's like, don't miss the AI bandwagon, just use it, even if you have no idea how to use it. Not a great strategy, actually. However, there are some other things that can come along with AI during this time. There's photo. What does that stand for? A fantastic opportunity to overachieve. Okay, how many of us believe that AI can actually offer some incredible opportunities, do things you've never done before? Okay, all right, you're at reInvent, so I assume you understand these possibilities. And finally, one more, FOLO. And you're wondering what that stands for, is fearlessness offers limitless outcomes. right? That if you are willing to take some risks, you're willing to have some courage, willing to make some changes, some pretty amazing outcomes can happen. How many of us think that this is possible with AI as well? All right, good number of us. So the goal today is to actually focus on the latter two and avoid the first two. And by the way, the first two I already knew, but the latter two I generated with some Gen AI to help me out. So you're probably wondering where that came from. But the fact is, we want to have the right mindset if we're going to succeed. AI is already exceeding average human capabilities in many arenas, right? You probably heard it's passing the bar exam in the United States at the 90th percentile. It's acing college advanced placement exams, with straight fives all across. And it's even passed the certified sommelier exam, right? The written part, not the tasting part, still working on that. But I mean, it is actually pretty amazing. And if you look at the predictions from 2 years ago, right? One study found that 2 years ago, they thought generative, or just AI in general, would match average human capabilities somewhere in the 2050s to 2070s. Now, this is kind of an eye chart, so I don't expect you to read it. But the point is things like sensory perception, output articulation, social emotional output would be somewhere, decades from now. With the advent of this thing called Gen AI over the last couple of years, all those predictions have actually already occurred, right? It's 2022, 2023, 2024. We are going through the most dramatic seismic shift in the history of our technological landscape. So how do we deal with that? Well, first we must understand that the nature of work is changing. The research has found that by 2030, 30% or maybe even more of work activities will be automated. That means everything that can be automated will be automated. So what does that leave us with as humans? Well, that's what the other bullet points are about. 92% of US executives say that the skills that are people-oriented, problem solving, empathy, active listening, interpersonal collaboration, are going to be the ones that help us succeed today and in the future. And finally, Microsoft does an annual work trends report, and they said that 3 key skills will help you succeed in this AI-powered future. They are emotional intelligence, flexibility, and the finally one is analytic judgment. So the third one is a little obvious, but the first two, maybe not so obvious, but those are required because again, as AI takes over a lot more of the left brain activities, the analytical ones, we are left with our distinctly and uniquely human capabilities. So this is not science fiction. This is our future. And in fact, it's not just our future, it's our present. I was actually having lunch with a friend and colleague of mine, CTO of one of our customers, and we're talking about how you can use AI now in your virtual meetings to do sentiment analysis, summarize your meetings, understand how people are feeling and reacting to the things you say. It's already part of our meetings, and it's only become more and more a part of our teams in the days to come. So what does the future look like? The reality is no one knows. We live in what are called VUCA times, right? Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And, really the catch-all for it that people use is, hey, it's just crazy out there. It is pretty wild, and the pace of technological change is hard to comprehend. And what's notable is that the planning window for many companies has really condensed and in some cases even collapsed. It used to be that you make a 5-year, 10-year plan for your company. And these days, a lot of leaders are not doing that. They're lucky if they make a 2-year plan because they don't even know what's going to be different 6 months from now because things are changing so rapidly. And so understanding the future's unknown is something we have to grasp and tackle. And the situation presents what's called an adaptive challenge. Every leader needs to really adapt and to keep on adapting, and that's the challenge for all of us as leaders. And so there's a framework I want to share with you that can be helpful when it comes to really wild and crazy adaptive situations. It's called the Cynefin framework. And Cynefin is a Welsh word that means the place of many belongings. And it offers a way to describe and cognize sort of the reality that we're in. It's created by David Snowden, and it's been used to be able to work with international organizations, counter-terrorist organizations, healthcare companies, technology companies. And so it describes 4 different relationships between cause and effect. There's clear, complicated, complex, and chaotic. And the key to succeed is to understand which domain you're actually operating in. because the strategy for one domain will absolutely sink you in a different domain. So let me just briefly describe it, and I want to ask you as I describe it, which domain do you think you're in when it comes to adopting AI? Okay, the first one is clear, and that is where the relationship between cause and effect, it's very obvious. Everyone knows it. There's a best practice, right? Baking cookies from a recipe, routine software update, standard operating procedure in a manufacturing process. Mindset, compliance. Okay, the second domain is what's called complicated, and that's where the relationship between cause and effect requires some expert analysis, right? There's a recommended way of doing things, but you really need to know your stuff, and you might vary it based on the situation. Maybe like filing taxes, cybersecurity analysis, setting up a new technology stack, right? So the mindset is analysis. Look at the past to understand what to do in the future. Okay, the third is what's called complex, and that is where the relationship between cause and effect are emergent. They're not there yet. You have to basically figure it out as you go. You have to experiment, improve, learn. Something like a massive career pivot or a major organizational transformation. And so the mindset here is discovery, right? You're learning what's happening as you do it. And the final one is chaotic. That's where basically all hell breaks loose, and there is no apparent relationship between the cause and effect. And so there are novel practices, right? You're doing whatever you need to do to manage the unexpected. Stock market crash is an example. The pandemic is another example. A terrorist attack that was unexpected, usually they are, is another example. And so the mindset is just action, right? It's like just stem the bleeding. Now, which domain do you think you're operating in when it comes to AI and what you think your organization is in? How many of you think it's the clear one? How many of you it's pretty clear, everyone should know? Okay, no takers on that one. How many of you think it's complicated? If you just look at the past enough, you can figure out the future. All right, a few takers on that one. How many of you think it's in the complex, where you're figuring it out as you go because you don't have the answers? Okay, a lot of takers on that one. And then final one, how many of you think you're in the chaotic, like, oh my goodness, it's just crazy out there? Okay, clearly, almost all of us are in the complex and chaotic. And the challenge is there are too many leaders trying to operate in a complicated situation. Let's continuously analyze what we did before, and if we look hard enough, we can figure out what to do next. But that does not work. There is a better way to do it, which we're going to share with you today. And so, it's really fascinating because when you look at this, one sure thing about all this complexity and ambiguity is at the jagged frontier of AI, is what many people call it, there's a lot of stress, right? And you need the right skill sets and mindsets to manage it properly so you can think clearly, make good decisions, and inspire your people. And that's what we call epic leadership skills. And so today, I'm going to talk about how you can augment these skills and how you can walk away literally and start doing some things differently for yourself, your organization, and maybe even persuade some of your more senior leaders to be able to adopt some of these as well. Really fascinating quote from Ronald Heifetz, who 20 years ago actually said this, Harvard professor: the single biggest failure of leadership is to treat adaptive challenges like technical problems, and therefore to apply technical solutions. We do not have only a technical challenge. We have an adaptive challenge, and that means the technology needs to be figured out, but the human part needs to also evolve to be able to manage this in a productive way. So that's where epic leadership comes in. It's the evolution of leadership. We've entered this new era where technical leaders need to evolve beyond just the technical solutions to human-centered ones. And to sort of give us a guiding light, I want to share about one of the most amazing adventures of all time, where it was highly ambiguous, incredibly volatile, totally uncertain, and it was life or death. And it was somebody who was trying to basically be the first to cross Antarctica on foot, and it didn't turn out the way that he had hoped. And of course, many of us know this is Ernest Shackleton back in 1914. One of the greatest examples of epic leadership. And his boat, the Endurance, wound up being crushed by ice early in the beginning of his journey, and it became a harrowing 18-month struggle just to survive. But he did some really amazing things to help his team make it out alive. He was very positive. He had unrelenting faith to overcome while being very realistic about the challenges, celebrated small wins. He was also very adaptable, flexing to every new situation that came about. At one point, he took an 800-mile journey in a 23-foot lifeboat to be able to get to an inhabited island to call for help. Right? Another thing was he was quite empathetic. He listened to his men, he heard their challenges, he heard their concerns, actually showed he cared, because any moment they could, basically have done a mutiny and that would have, all would have been lost. And finally, he had great communication skills. He was transparent about the situation, he addressed issues head on, and he was good at managing conflicts. And you know what was amazing? Every single man on his team got out alive, when really they should not have, and it's because he was an epic leader. So what's happening with us today? All of us are facing this leadership challenge. And why is leadership difficult sometimes? How many of us actually have some kind of leadership role officially at your organization? Okay, all right, a lot of you. And even if you don't manage people officially, you're a leader because you're here at reInvent. Obviously, you're supposed to go back and influence the people around you. And so leadership is difficult, and we found out exactly why. It's right here. Have you looked at the mirror at some point and seen this animal looking back at you? Maybe it was this morning, right? When you're stressed out, it's difficult to think clearly and make good decisions. And we're all facing pervasive stressors right now. Complexity, ambiguity, change, disagreement, rejection, and even shame. And what's really interesting, that last one, we don't talk about shame much in American culture, but Brene Brown is like an expert shame researcher. And you know what she found is the #1 shame trigger for senior leaders? C-level executives at your company, or maybe you are one of them. You know what the biggest one is? Most people think it's failure, but it's not. It's irrelevance. That to be a senior leader and to be irrelevant, I didn't really do anything significant with myself, it's literally the worst thing that could happen. And so that explains why many senior leaders might be running around like headless chickens right now, because they absolutely do not want to miss the boat and miss the AI bandwagon and somehow become irrelevant. And so we have to manage that in a productive way. And all leaders are vulnerable right now because you're all experiencing uncertainty, risk, and exposure. Vulnerable doesn't mean you're sharing your deepest, darkest secrets and talking about your childhood. It means you're all facing these three things. And, it reminds me of a story about an old sea captain where, he was sailing the high seas, very successful, and one day the lookout said, "Captain, I see one pirate ship on the horizon." He says, "Bring me my red shirt." Puts it on, they fight off the pirates, they win the day. A week later, the lookout says, "Captain, I see 2 pirate ships on the horizon." Captain says, "Bring me my red shirt." Puts it on, they fight off the pirates, they win the day. And the first mate said, "Captain, I've noticed you put on a red shirt every time we fight the pirates. Why do you do that?" And he said, "There's a really good reason. When I'm fighting, if I get hit or stuck by a sword and I start bleeding, I don't want anybody to notice and lose courage, so I put on a red shirt." And the first mate said, "That is a fantastic idea. I love it." So a few weeks later, the lookout says, "Captain, I see 10 pirate ships on the horizon." Captain says, "Bring me my brown pants." So, many leaders are facing a brown pants movement right now, and so we need to learn how to manage our social, emotional state, be able to make good decisions. So before I jump into how to do that, I do want to share one final thing, and that is stress and performance have this curvilinear relationship. You're all incredibly smart people. I don't have to even wonder about that. You work at your company, they paid money for you to go to reInvent. Clearly you're doing something significant. And yet, very smart people can become temporarily dumb if we have too much stress. Because what happens is if you have too little stress, Yerkes and Dotson did this research, they found that you wind up being bored and tired. So you actually need a certain amount of stress to perform at a high level. And so if you have too little, you kind of wind up looking like this. On the other hand, if you have too much stress, you actually wind up looking like that animal we saw a little earlier. And so what you want to make sure you're actually doing is you're operating in that middle ground where you're focused, creative, thinking clearly, and that's that sort of middle stress level. And Daniel Goleman, who's a psychologist and in many ways a leader in the emotional intelligence realm, he calls this maximum cognitive efficiency. You're using all of your IQ skills in the most optimal way rather than making some suboptimal decisions or behavior because you're not thinking clearly. Have you ever seen somebody really smart do something really dumb or say something really stupid? It might have been your leader, it might have been you, right? Why? Because we're operating at minimum cognitive efficiency. So to be able to have that maximum cognitive efficiency is what we need to be able to do to, in general, succeed in life, but definitely be able to manage this AI present and this AI future. Now, I have one final question before I go. How many of us wake up in the morning and you've had this experience lately? You say, you know, I really hope there's more stress at work today because yesterday was just not stressful enough, right? Very few people have that. The reality is most of us are operating in sort of that right-hand wacky zone. And so having skills to bring ourselves back into that middle zone where maximized cognitive efficiency is in many ways the skill set that we need of emotional and social intelligence. And there's a reality of us neurobiologically, and Dr. Antonio Damasio, who's a well-known neuroscientist, says this: we're not thinking machines that feel, we are feeling machines that think. And from an evolutionary perspective, very true. We actually developed our emotional communication centers first, and then we layered on top of that what's known as the prefrontal cortex, and that's also known as the neocortex, the newest part of our brain. So we're all very smart. Let's leverage the IQ, but if we actually integrate it with our EQ, we can be even more successful. All right, I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Ala, who's going to talk about giving you ideas of how to optimize yourself and your organization for success.
Thank you, Rich. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. And as Rich mentioned, as leaders in this room, whether you directly manage people or you just influence teams across the organization, you have an outsized impact on the culture and the innovation that happens at your companies. And as owners, there's a few things that we can do as leaders to drive and foster that innovative thinking and leadership, and we'll discuss that in the next few minutes. And before we jump in, a little bit about myself. My name is Ala Simino. I'm the Worldwide Growth Leader for the Innovation and Transformation Program here at AWS. I've been with Amazon for 9 years, and behind me you see a photo of my family and, of course, our favorite pastime, which is to travel. We used to do more of this before the little ones arrived, but one of the images I'd like to call to your attention is in the top right there. It was a giant tortoise, and this was in the Galapagos Islands. And in the Galapagos Islands, my husband and I stumbled upon one of those souvenir shops, and there was a t-shirt with a very familiar quote that I had seen years prior at a history class, and it said the following: "It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It is the one that's most adaptable to change." And this was a quote from Charles Darwin as he studied human evolution or evolution or origins of evolution. And today I'd argue that we are facing a similar origin. Technology has made unprecedented changes in the way that we lead, the way that we operate, and as leaders we need to adapt. And the way that we also influence our organizations needs to change. And so we'll spend a few minutes discussing this today. Now, there's two key and very simple, I'd say, ways to optimize ourselves for innovation. One of them is regulating our response to stress, and the other is actually operating with an adaptable mindset. So let's dive in and discuss each of these. Now, we should look for simple and effective tools to regulate stress, and the first one is positivity. As humans, we have a natural negativity bias, which means we focus on things that are more negative than positive. Has anyone read the news recently? Right? We naturally deflect that way. And so to counteract the negativity that we're seeing or feeling, we need to actually have a healthy ratio of positivity. And that ratio is somewhere around 3-to-1. Now, as you heard Rich share just a few moments ago, the story or the survival of Shackleton and his crew, they prevailed despite a brutal environment. And the reason that they did so is because they believed that they would endure, and they did. Now, the Navy SEALs refer to positivity or focusing on the good as attention control. They found that negativity degrades performance, it weakens the mind, it weakens the body. And so it makes sure that if we do not change or have a greater focus on the positive, we're actually preventing our ability to think creatively or innovatively to problems that we're facing. And a simple way to boost positivity, and you could do this today, is called the 3x3 technique. So write down 3 things each night that you're grateful for, and you do this for 3 weeks. I assure you, you will feel better by the end of those 3 weeks. The second area that you can focus on is connection with friends. Now, we've long known the impact of community on our mental and well-being, physical well-being. Now, the connection to friends, it helps actually reduce cortisol levels in our body in just a few minutes. And loneliness is an issue, and particularly for leaders. And so much so that loneliness impact on your body, or the feeling of stress that it induces, is as much as smoking 15 cigarettes per day. It's monumental. So make sure that as a leader, you have ways to connect, whether it's a peer mentoring group, you have a community. Make sure that you have an outlet like we have here at Amazon. Thank you to Rich and his team around EQ at Amazon. But leaders need a safe space to be vulnerable, to be heard, and to connect. The third area I'd like to call to your attention is breathing mindfully. Now, breathing, something so simple as breathing, can help regulate stress in the body immediately. And one of the most popular techniques is called box breathing. By show of hands, has anyone heard of box breathing before? All right, we have a really smart crew here today.
Oh, yeah.
But we're going to repeat it anyway for those who are not aware. Now, the box breathing technique was popularized by the Navy SEALs. And the way that it works is quite simple. You take a breath for a count of 4, you hold the breath for 4, you release for a count of 4, and you hold it out for a count of 4. And you do this for a few minutes. And in so doing, you're actually activating your parasympathetic nervous system. This actually helps regulate any intense emotions that you're feeling. It lowers your heart rate, lowers blood pressure, and it brings more oxygen to the body. Now, if you would be so kind as to indulge me, and a quick breathing exercise. So if you are holding anything, put it down, get comfortable in your seats, and give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. All right. So I'm gonna count this out. We're gonna do this for 3 rounds. So I'm gonna ask that you take a breath. So take a breath in, hold, 2, 3, 4. Hold that breath, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. Hold it out, 2, 3, 4. One more time. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. Hold it out, 2, 3, 4. Last time. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. Hold this breath out for 2, 3, 4. How do you feel? Feel good? Give me a thumbs up. All right, for those who didn't give me a thumbs up, I promise you'll never have to do this again. But if it did immediately give you benefit, you now have a tool in your toolkit you can use right away. Now, the other element that's really important to making sure that we think innovatively, creatively, and maximize all of the goodness that we're seeing with Gen AI is to embrace an adaptable mindset. Now, our mindset helps us entirely change our approach to uncertainty, ambiguity, complexity. It has an outsized impact on our ability to innovate. Now, the adaptability mindset goes by many names, some of which you might be familiar with. One of them is called the growth mindset. Carol Dweck has branded it. Or beginner's mindset from Shoshin. Here at Amazon, we call it a day one mindset. But the intent of what's really doing is describing the way that you are thinking and responding. And the distinction between an adaptable mindset and a fixed mindset is the following. When you're faced with a challenge, you see it as an opportunity versus a threat. When you get feedback, you see it as an opportunity to improve versus a personal criticism of who you are and what you're doing. That it's a learn-it-all culture, not a know-it-all culture in your business, where failure is assumed as a part of the learning experience versus something that should be entirely avoided. And the feeling that you can actually gain new skills in an adaptable mindset versus I feel like it's too late, that ship has sailed for me. And lastly, the belief that you can actually influence change, positive change, versus there's nothing I can do, c'est la vie. And the distinction between these mindsets is that one creates excitement, it creates creativity, and the other creates anxiety. It creates resistance. Now, if we take this framework and apply it to what we're seeing today with AI, it in essence explains why some people embrace AI and others entirely reject it. So it's all about the mindset. So is AI something that's working for you or against you? Can I learn new skills? Do I feel that there is a future here that is going to actually help me and shape me, or will I become obsolete? That's mindset. Can I influence how AI is used in my organization, or is it just going to happen to me? So which side of the table do you feel like you're on? And if you're on one side that you're not so positively thinking about, how do you influence that change and open that mindset? Now, the other really excellent brain stretching exercise is called reframing. Give me a thumbs up if you've heard about reframing before. Okay, quite a few of you. Now, what reframing is doing as a technique is helping you to look at a situation from a different perspective, probably than your initial one. And there's 4 main ways to reframe. One is around reinterpretation. Now, reinterpretation helps to remove the threat from the situation. So instead of thinking about something like, gosh, I didn't succeed, I'm a loser, it's, I actually didn't succeed, I'm not good at it yet. It opens the door for change, evolution, for learning. And you should get comfortable with failure. This is all part of that. The second is repositioning. Consider whatever it is that you're facing from a different perspective. How can I be grateful for this? How can I learn? By repositioning the situation, you're actually creating grit and resilience. Reordering. Now, think about the value that you're placing on X. How important is it? Are you going to care about it in 10 minutes, 10 hours, 10 days? And if the answer is no, why are you putting so much emphasis on it? And the last one is normalizing it. The benefit about normalization is that it actually helps to put the situation in context, which is everybody else is going through it. And with Gen AI, they are, right? And by actually demonstrating this form of self-compassion, you're improving your odds and chances of actually thinking creatively, thinking innovatively, instead of being stifled by the situation ahead of you. Now, there's this great quote from Jeff Bezos, our founder and chairman, which I'd love to share, and it's related to kind of how we reposition situations. And he says the following: the smartest people are constantly revising their understanding, reconsidering a problem they thought they had already solved, and they're open to new viewpoints, new information, new ideas, contradictions, and challenges to their own way of thinking. So here at Amazon, we do have a BA, learn it all versus know it all culture. But the reality is we don't know it all. So let's stop pretending and open the door for that ingenuity, that creativity amongst ourselves as leaders to our direct teams and those who we influence in the organization. So now that we've spoken a little bit about ourselves, let's talk about how we can actually bring some of these benefits across the entire organization that we operate in. So behind me here was a study from Harvard. And the question, particularly here, that they asked in their poll was, which factor has the greatest positive impact on a team's ability to innovate and sustain high performance? Now, here on the screen were a few different choices. They're hypotheses. One was having really smart people, those with high IQ. Second was the right combination of skills. The third was years of experience. The fourth was charismatic leadership on the team. And the fifth was high team IQ with their psychological safety. Give me a thumbs up if you thought that the answer was E. All right, guys, you kind of beat me to it, but quite a few of you did. But the reality is the hypotheses had always assumed it would be the first 4 attributes. And the research actually had proven that while all of these attributes are important, the one that had the most impact on the success of the team and the performance and innovation of the team was the last one, high team IQ. Similarly, there was a study conducted at MIT, and they did a research on collective team intelligence, so what makes a team smart. Now here on the left, you will see the factors that they assumed would be the right factors, but they actually weren't. they found that none of these things were critical. One, which was average intelligence in the individuals of the group, intelligence of the smartest person in the group cohesion, motivation, satisfaction. Here's what they did find to be factors. The average social sensitivity of the members of the group, the extent to which the group's conversations were not dominated by a few, and lastly, the percentage of women in the group. The bottom line here, ladies and gentlemen, was that EQ was far a greater predictor of collective intelligence than IQ. And so the intent here is to explain that as leaders or influencers in your organization, that as we look to maximize and rise all tides in our organization, that in order to do the collective and to improve the collective intelligence is that we should focus not just on the IQ, but the EQ of the team. Now, to define just more clearly what is psychological safety, I have a quote here from Amy Edmondson, who is a renowned professor at Harvard, and she describes it as the following. Psychological safety is a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, raising questions, concerns, sharing mistakes, and that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. So to put this in layman's terms, members of your organization can actually say things such as, I actually don't know what I'm doing. I need help. I screwed up. I have a wild idea. I have a different point of view, and that's acceptable. But interestingly, Edmondson also pointed out that while these factors in psychological safety is vital for innovation, it's actually not enough. You need to actually pair with other elements in the organization, such as high expectations, and we'll discuss that in a minute. So let's talk a bit about what it takes to actually build innovation safety in your organization. And the first element, by no surprise, is trust. And then we have intelligent failures and generative disagreement. Okay, so let's talk about trust for a moment here. So many organizations are facing situations where employees are resisting AI. And research has found that trust is actually a major attribute to whether or not an organization will embrace or reject AI. So according to the Edelman Trust Barometer, for employees who didn't trust their leaders in handling AI, 74% admitted that they would not embrace AI. And in fact, 43% said outright they would reject it. Now, this is interesting, and this highlights the delicate balance as a leader to move fast but also build trust in the organization. The other study, which was for Zenger and Folkman, they described three critical elements to build trust in an organization. So care, positive relationships, building consistency, and competence. But what was fascinating is when it came to trust, low care negatively impacted the trust by nearly 2 times that of low consistency. And so most would assume it's actually the other factors, but what it means is as leaders, you need to spend more time in listening to the organization, leaning into the employees and asking the question, so what matters to my people? How do we actually balance expectations with genuine concern for our talent? How do we provide candid yet helpful feedback? And how are we going to be transparent? So essentially, as a leader, you actually have to demonstrate that you genuinely care about your talent. And at Amazon, we're actually investing also with Gen AI training to show our care that we want our talent to be better, to be smarter, with a goal of training 2 million employees by end of 2025. But trust matters, and it actually matters more significantly now with the advent of Gen AI. The other element that I'd like to raise to your attention is actually talking about intelligent failures. Now, according to Amy Edmondson, there are 3 types of failures, some of which you're quite familiar, I imagine, with, but one is basic. So these are preventable, routine, operational sort of elements. So think about like operating equipment or their standard procedures. The intent is to have no failures. But then you have complex failures where you're dealing with large, interdependent, complex systems. Think about it as, an aircraft carrier, a hospital, a data center. The intent is to avoid consequential failures, and often that's by mitigating or trying to reduce the number of small failures that can lead to catastrophic issues. You want to avoid these. But then there are also intelligent failures. And these are actually not the type of failures you want to avoid. In fact, these are the types of failures you want to have more of. At the frontier of Gen AI, you want to make sure you're running a lot of experiments, that you're learning. And of course, you're making intelligent failures at the right scale, but learning. And you're creating and fostering an environment in your organization that's going to promote that. And as leaders, we actually have to make those changes and make that acceptable in order for this to happen. And at Amazon, we do this. We have a model that helps us expand upon experimentation and ensure that we're making a lot of intelligent failures. And that mental model is called one-way or two-way doors. Give me a thumbs up if you've ever heard about this mental framework. Okay, quite a few, more than I assumed. It's a great job. So now, the framework of one-way or a two-way door is the following. So when you are making a decision about a new product, a service, an investment, whatever it might be, we look at this framework very commonly and ask, is it a one-way door, which means I walk through that door and it's large, irrevocable consequences. I cannot come back through it. Having children, building a data center, like once you're in, right? But most decisions in business and in life are two-way doors. So you can walk through that door, make a learning, and it doesn't work the way you want. You take those learnings, you walk right through, come on back and do something different. And so at Amazon, we think about it as if you are waiting for more than 70% of the data to make a decision, you've waited much too long. You've slowed down your pace of innovation, you're stagnating. So be risk-taking, not risk-averse. And this mental model is very attuned to how we operate here, but we also understand that other organizations, cultures, that is not the way that they operate. And so how do you take small steps to take and kind of make small, intelligent failures and take those learnings to rapidly expand innovation in your business? Now, the third key element is maximizing generative disagreement. Now, research has shown that disagreement, or the production or sharing of new ideas, new perspectives, actually helps foster innovation. And all organizations are somewhere here on this spectrum. But if you have too little disagreement, you create a culture of complacency, what we call terminal politeness, ruinous empathy. Everyone's really nice, but you're not actually sharing the real perspective. But you have too much disagreement, and now everything is a personal attack. It's obnoxious, it's aggressive. Where you want to be is somewhere in the middle, right? This culture of candor, cognitive friction, intellectual honesty. This is what we call the innovation edge. Just curious, give me a thumbs up if you're on the left side here, on the complacent side. Got a few. What about on the right? Antagonistic culture? I won't share it, I promise. Okay. What about challenge culture? Most of you are in the middle, and that's great to see. And if you're not there, how do you move in that direction? What's really interesting, though, as most companies were surveyed recently, many companies end up falling on the left side here. Cultures of low disagreement. This, I don't want to offend anyone, so I'm not going to say anything. This passive aggressive, while it's useful maybe temporarily, the challenge is you're not putting your best ideas forward. You're leaving intellectual value on the table. And that's not good for your business, and that's not great for your customers. Now, the type of disagreement also matters. This is important. So the right disagreement creates and produces better ideas, better decisions, but we want to be careful that it's actually healthy and productive. So you have task conflict and you have relationship conflict. And what you're trying to do is increase task conflict and remove or reduce relationship conflict. And what I mean by this is when you have tension in the business, it's intellectual, it is not emotional. Where you're challenging the idea, not the person. Where your tone, it's lively, it's vigorous, instead of combative or aggressive. And that you feel like when you are disagreeing, that you're doing so at the service of a commonly shared goal versus you're trying to protect your turf, your ego. And that you feel like you're open to say, I do not understand the thinking, can you clarify? Versus, that's a really, really dumb idea, right? And so this is really important. Like the way that we look at Disagreement varies by culture, by nationality, but the intent here that I'm trying to articulate is that it's really important to foster healthy cultures, debate and disagreement, to foster forward innovation in your business. And we have a leadership principle here at Amazon. It's called have backbone, disagree, and commit. It's not perfect, but leaders here at Amazon are expected to foster healthy debates and disagreements. It is not suboptimal to just go along with it and see what happens, and we hope that we're going to get there. We want to hear it, we want to see it, we want our teams to share what they have to say, stubborn on the vision, let the disagreement on the table, but then we'll make a decision and move forward. We need to debate, and we want to hear you, and we want to hear each other, and require some of this disagreement to happen to do so. So just as a quick recap, as we think about kind of the future of what Gen AI has in store for us as leaders, as influencers in our business, there are really 4 key elements that are important to making sure that you're building these fearless organizations. And innovation culture matters. It's going to either accelerate growth or stifle it, and we want to make sure that we're doing the best we can for our customers, for our business. And so these are the 4 key areas. So 1, build positive relationships. Earn trust, lead with empathy. Ask your teams, like, what are their pains, their challenges, their dreams? How might I help you? Secondly is modeling curiosity, asking a lot of questions like, what am I missing here? Poke holes at my reasoning. I'm not perfect as a leader. Tell me what I'm missing. Thirdly, framing the work as a learning opportunity, this day one mentality that we have here, which is this is experimentation. We're learning and we're learning together. There is no playbook, but I'm open and willing to hear what you have to say so we can make it better, so we can move faster. And the last one is promoting generative disagreement. So have backbone, disagree and commit, but share your voices. I want to hear from you. We need more debate, more discussion. Employees need to feel like they are heard, that experimentation is something that's supported, that's nourished, and where failure is acceptable, so that we can actually rise all tides in the ship and make sure that we're moving this company forward. And it's also important to make sure that we have that psychological safety in the space to be able to do so in our organization. Now, I'm incredibly fortunate, I think Rich would argue the same, that we have a bit of this culture here at Amazon that fosters that creativity, but if that's not kind of where you are, we'd love to kind of work with you and see how we might be able to help adapt some of that. Now, one thing I'll just say, as we go to closing, and one final thought is, it's really important that we do all embrace change. We're in this together. Nobody has all of the answers. And there's this great quote from Jim Collins, which is, uncertainty is chronic, instability is permanent, disruption is common, and we can neither predict nor govern events. There will be no new normal. There will only be a continuous series of not normal episodes, defying prediction and unforeseen by most of us until they happen. We are in an entirely new era of leadership, ladies and gentlemen. And as epic leaders here in the room, we have a massive, distinct advantage in how we lead to maximize what the future has in an AI-powered future. Now, there are a few resources here that we can also share post-fact, that if you'd like to learn more about any of the content that Rich and I shared, feel free to take a photo. I think some of you were taking photos, so feel free to take another photo. We also have a number of different assets or resources. Please come learn. We have QR codes. They'll take you to the Epic leadership page, as well as to the Amazon innovation page. There's a lot of great content beyond this topic, but in addition to it. And then the last thing I just wanted to say is thank you for being with us, for spending the afternoon, and for joining us here at reInvent. Our team has a few additional sessions coming up. If you have the time this afternoon, we'd love for you to join. But other than that, Rich and I are going to go ahead and close and open up for Q&A. And because this is a silent session, we're just going to ask that you come and you meet us here at the front of the stage if you have any questions. But otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your day and a great reInvent. Thank you.
Thank you very much.